Coming up on this edition of Hip Hop Now podcast, it's the best of 2022. Welcome to Hip Hop Now podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now podcast. I know what you're saying. Wait a minute. I thought last episode was the last episode. It sort of kind of was. But we got more in 2023. But what we're here to talk about today is the best hip-hop albums of 2022. First and foremost, subscribe to the podcast. Hit that like button. It's available wherever you get the podcast. And most importantly, share it with people you know. Big shout out to all of the supporters over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. If you would like to become a producer, a supporter of this podcast, visit the link in the description of this episode. Now, 2022. Here we are. A lot of things going on in 2022. Some unfortunate things, some great things in music. I know I keep saying things, but you know what I mean. Moments, events, situations, stuff like that. So essentially, for those that listen, you know what this is. We go over all of the albums that dropped that, in my opinion at least, are worthy of your time. This is the best of the best to me. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, how so? They either all classic or they're GOATs or they all whack, one or the other. Not true. So, if you are unfamiliar and you're new here, welcome. Tell your friends. But my process, like I say every year, is to try to listen to albums I'm interested in from artists I like, as well as albums that have a big buzz, whether it's from someone new or someone I never gave a chance. And then albums that may come across my radar that I just say, let me press play on that. I listen to them 3 times in order to grade them, right? Now, granted, if I like the album, obviously I listen to it more than 3 times. But essentially for me, if you can even get to that 3rd listen, you're doing something, right? Your album is at least good. There are plenty of albums I stopped after a couple of bars. There's plenty of albums I stopped after a song or two. And the process for the year-end roundup of what is the best really is about my phone, right? Most of my music, all my music is also on my phone. And throughout the year, the albums that I like, well, they stay there. And I listen to them from time to time, and some I listen to more than others. And by the end of the year, I go back and I listen to each of the albums again, right? Because some albums that are dope drop in like January and February, and then sometimes in the spring. And it's easy to forget how much you like those albums if you're listening to so much music. So literally, what I have for you is the best of the best. So if you've been like on another planet and you haven't heard nothing but Kendrick and maybe King's Disease 3, here's a ton of albums for you to check out if you're interested. Now, I'm not going to review them all. I'm just going to get into who's on the list and give, a couple thoughts. Now, granted, before I get started, this does not represent my top 5 of the year. That's another episode that will follow this episode as we get closer to the new year. But right now, let's talk about the best hip-hop albums of 2022. Let's start right at the top. Kendrick Lamar, Mr. Morale, and the Big Steppers. We said it before, Kendrick does not miss. This may not be an album you listen to when you're trying to get dressed to go to the club, or maybe you got some issues, and maybe you do. But this is a concept album that basically is sort of a therapy session for Kendrick and the listeners and black folk and a whole bunch of stuff. But definitely one of the best of the year, a moment in 2022. Uh, West Side Gun 10. Now, this album is number 10 in a series in which I will not really repeat, but H wears Hermes, you know that. And I didn't know what to think about this album because West Side Gun dropped a project not too long ago within 2022, and I really wasn't a fan. This one's better. And yes, Stove God is on like almost every track. Pusha T, it's almost dry. I'm gonna tell you right now, when I first heard this album, I was like, oh, it's cool. And I think I had a little like Daytona hangover because I felt like Daytona, I put so much like into that album as far as it's a classic to me. I'm gonna just, instead of stuttering, I'm gonna just say Daytona is a classic for me. So it was difficult to have a follow up and feel like, is this better, blah, 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 or be neutral. But I feel like Pusha T's It's Almost Dry is great because, and I'm not saying classic or anything like that. I'm just saying a great album for 2022 because I found myself after that first initial listen, wanting to go back to the album over and over and over again. It's just something about the beats, something about the way everything comes together on this album. Rome Streets, Kiss the Ring. Now, I wasn't first in line to listen to this album. I'm going to just be real with y'all. I just was not. Rome Streets is cool, but there was no point in which I had ever heard him at one point. Not to say he's whack, but there was no, well, obviously he's not whack, he's on his list. But there, there was no point in time where I felt like I needed to hear his Griselda debut. Well, I'm glad I listened. It's a great album. And I think what I like most about it is not that Griselda's dead or Benny and, Conway and them got beef. None of that. It just, something about this album, Kiss the Ring, reminded me of the days before Griselda was as big as they are, or as far as the notoriety they have today. More on the mixtape, they releasing a mixtape every week. It gave me that vibe, and I really thought it was a dope joint. And the beats were crazy too. Nas, King's Disease 3. Nas and Hit Boy did it again, man. I don't know how. I don't I don't know what the secret sauce is, but it's working and it's worked for 4 projects straight. King's Disease 3 was sort of like I was looking for flaws, and don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect album, but I was just pleasantly surprised by how good it was and how it didn't sound exactly like the other projects. And that's difficult to do when you put out that much work within a short span of time, including a lockdown pandemic time. So, Core Mega, The Realness 2. Now, I'm not the biggest Core Mega fan in the world. The Realness was the first time I was like, yo, I kind of like this album. And every now and again, I listen to the original, The Realness. I also love The Testament. But the other albums, I didn't really feel it, and I felt like, well, I'll just stick to the ones I like. I think this is an example of someone doing a sequel to their best album and honestly doing it justice. It doesn't detract from the original Realness. It doesn't exactly. There's some moments where I kind of cringe like, oh, we don't need updated versions of songs on that album. But that's not the entire album. I think this is a solid album from Core Mega. I think this is a respectable and worthy sequel to me, his best album in his catalog. Denzel Curry, Melt My Eyes, See Your Future, extended version. Now, the original version came out, and honestly, I thought it was cool. I didn't think it was one of the best of the year. And that was because of the production, honestly, because I felt like, it's okay. It's rapping and there's beats, the end. But the extended version is better. Why? They retrofit jazz like hip hop like tracks, like people like Robert Glasper worked on some songs on here, and I think it's better. I think it better suits his lyrics and the songs from that album. Now, not every record hits me in that way, but the majority of it was like a breath of fresh air. Because you know how you like an artist and whatever, and they got a new album coming out, you anticipate it, and you be like, man, this ain't really hit me like the other one. But this extended version, this reworking of the music just said, this is the version that should have came out, in my opinion, but I'm glad we have it. Harbor City Season 1, that's King Crooked and Joel Ortiz. I feel like these two make a great duo, right? They make, they from Slaughterhouse, so, they bar kings and they got concepts like crazy. But I kind of like this because you would have thought this would be the first album or first project they would do, right? Oh, I'm from Brooklyn. Oh, I'm from the West Coast. And, let's talk about our sides. But they're just doing that now. And they did it in such a way, as far as like a concept, well, it was actually cool to listen to. So I feel like if you are a fan of either of those artists or Slaughterhouse or whatever it may be, you should check out Harbor City Season 1. Rapper Big Pooh, To Dream in Color. Pleasantly surprised. I honestly this is one of them joints where I was like, yeah, Rapper Big Pooh sometimes have some dope joints. And I ain't talking about Little Brother, I'm talking about solo career. So I figured, well, press play and see what's up. Pleasantly surprised by this album. It is thought-provoking. It's very personal from him. Beats, bars, whatever you pulling up for, it's there. So you should definitely check that out. I could see this album, or at least it should, appear in a couple of people's top 5 of the year or top 10 or whatever list you make it. Joey Badass 2000. Now, I didn't really have any expectations for this. I loved Joey Badass's album, American Badass. I thought it was highly slept on, maybe a little bit overshadowed because Kendrick had dropped To Pimp a Butterfly. But I think he met my expectations and somewhat exceeded it with this album. Now, I will say I'm not a fan of too many of the co-signed skits on here from, various artists, from Nas and to Diddy and all that. But nevertheless, I feel like he came with the lyrics, he came with the bars, he came with the beats, he came with variety. This being somewhat of a sequel to his, I guess, fan acclaimed and critically acclaimed 1999 from his earlier days as an MC. I think it's a great album, and you should check it out, for real. What Up, Vern and Kill, Idled Mind. Now, this is not on my list because I know them. This is not on my list because I've made music with Kill. This is not on my list because I'm the only feature on the album. This is on my list because I support a lot of dudes, right, that I know that make music and do other things. But I really enjoy when I'm taken out of that mode of knowing a person and just listening as a fan. And I kind of feel like the connection with the production on this album, along with What Up Vern's lyrics, with his thought-provoking lyrics, he always has a message. He always has something interesting to say. He always have pop culture and history from his coast, from his neighborhood, from his family. All of it's embedded in his rhymes. One thing about rappers that I think, not to say that it doesn't happen with every rapper today, but I think some people lose that connection with the music is you want to connect with the artist, right? Maybe not consciously you're thinking, I'm going to press play so I can connect with the artist. I hope you don't say that. Something's wrong with you if you say something like that. But in general, when you like what an artist is saying, it's because you can relate in some way, whether it's happened to you or someone you know. Um, and I feel like this project is kind of like a breath of fresh air when you compare it to, the factory of trap and drill rappers and no drums beats rappers. Like there are a lot of rappers who sound the same generally and really don't have anything to say beyond their chain, what gun they bust, and cars and sometimes food. I'm looking at you, Rick Ross. So I felt like this is one of those albums you should check out because it's one of the best of 2022. Lupe Fiasco, Drill Music in Zion. Now, I'm not going to hold you. I remember, some may have forgotten. I remember Lupe said something to the effect that my upcoming album, he said it way before it came out, but my upcoming album, this is what he said, something like that. I'm not quoting him. My upcoming album is either a new Illmatic or better than Illmatic. Some maybe he didn't say better, but something on that level, right? So the expectations were extremely high. It's not Illmatic because it can't be. Illmatic is different. It came out at a different time. It's just too difficult to compare the two. But it's really good. Lupe Fiasco just does not get the flowers he deserves. I think there's some people who don't follow his career who only know Kick Push. And I love Kick Push. And I love Food and Liquor. But when you talk about intelligence in bars, make you feel smart listening to it. Make you feel like you doing something otherworldly, deciphering what's being said and following the thread of the words and the syllables and the placement of the words. And I'm getting too deep with it, but you get what I'm saying. Lupe is really good, and Drill Music in Zion is just another testament to how great he is on the mic and how slept on his catalog may be. I'm just saying. I'm gonna just keep it a buck with y'all. Fat Lip and Blue, live from the End of the World, Volume 1 demos. Honestly, don't ask me how I found it. I just saw Fat Lip and I was like, hey, Fat Lip. And I was like, oh, wait, with Blue. I didn't know what this was. I didn't know if it was old, if it was new. Y'all gotta let me know if it is. If you're from the future and you heard it already, you heard the second volume, then get your ass out of here, whatever. But please know that I thought it was really dope. And I know it says, demos, but there's something about the sound quality of these songs sounding and feeling like demos that I really liked. And the beats were there and the lyrics were there and this combination of two MCs worked. It was pretty dope. You should check it out. I Am God and the Black Depths Murder Castle. Similar to what I said about What Up Vern, this is the same thing, man. When you talk about bars, when you talk about precision, when you talk about intelligence and what you have to say regardless of the subject matter, I Am God is really dope at that. And he's appeared on my best of list more than once. Murder Castle is another testament to his skill and probably most importantly as a MC and a writer, his attention to detail. Again, it's like I said with Lupe, you feel smarter, you feel empowered listening to MCs like this. You should check out the album. I'm saying it's called Murder Castle. Earth Gang Ghetto Gods. Now, I'm a fan of Earth Gang. And when they signed with Dreamville, I was like, finally. Because I'm not the biggest fan of all the rappers on Dreamville besides J. Cole. I'm just not. They don't really do it for me like that. I know some people like them, but they don't do it for me like that. But Earth Gang is different. They bring a lot of style. They could go the bar route if they want, right? They can go all style on you. They can go trap. They could do whatever they want, and that's what I really like about them. And this album was really dope to me, Ghetto Gods. If you never heard of Earth Gang, maybe you should start at the beginning. That's where I did when I discovered them, their music. Really just thumbing through iTunes and finding music like a couple years back, and I stumbled across Earth Gang. Glad to see they have a bigger spotlight on what they do. And here's another reason why you should check them out. Now, here's a project that I didn't know was coming out. I didn't know if I should even listen to it, but I kind of like the dudes that were listed, and I was curious about what does this sound like with them in a group. This is Wiz Khalifa, Big Crit, Smoke DZA, and Girl Talk. The album is called Full Court Press. Now, if you know all of those artists and producers independently, maybe you can envision what this sounds like, but I think you would be wrong if you haven't heard it. They sound fantastic together. They sound like they should be a group. It works on all levels. There was one point where I felt like, okay, well, maybe Crit and Wiz Khalifa work together because I could kind of hear them as a group. But I didn't think Smoke DZA would fit perfectly with them, and he does. This one is definitely slept on, if you ask me. I don't know what everybody else lists. You from the future you already wrote your list. Get your ass out of here. I didn't ask you. Okay? Uh, but you should check it out. Black Thought and Danger Mouse cheat codes. Now, when I saw this, it was a promo off of one of the singles. I think it was the title track. And I was like, oh, I didn't know Black Thought was coming out with another project. And oh, Danger Mouse. Haven't heard him in a while. Pleasantly surprised again. This is probably Black Thought's best solo work. I think it's a combination of the tracks being varied enough, being interesting enough, right? To, I don't know, kind of elevate in some ways. I know it's difficult to say, but to elevate Black Thought's lyrics. So it's definitely a dope project, and it's a quick listen, so you should check it out. It's called Cheat Codes. Freddie Gibbs, Soul Sold Separately. This man just does not miss. He just does it. The variety in the music selections, the variety in his bars, somewhat variety in his content, but always interesting, always dope, always polished. That's the most important thing, right? Some of these cats put out albums and they sound great, but sometimes, no disrespect, but like with Dave East, sometimes his monotone can make me tune out a little bit when I'm trying to listen. Freddie Gibbs is so interesting at what he does. It's difficult to tune out. Great guest appearances, great verses from him, man. Overall, great concept for the overall album. This is a very dope album, man. You should check it out. Freddie Gibbs just doesn't disappoint, or rarely, at least. Let's just say rarely. Benny the Butcher, Tanner Talk 4. Yes, I talked about them both back to back. We know they had beef. I don't care. Tanner Talk 4 did not impress me the first time I hit play. I was like, damn, this ain't Tanner Talk 3 though. And then I had to let that go because similar to what I said about the Pusha T album, I kept listening. Not because I felt obligated or I had to. I kept listening because I started to like it more and more and more. And the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. And the more I was like, this is another good one or a great one to some bars. In Benny's catalog, Tana Talk 4 is worth your time, led by the single with J. Cole, which from the beat to J. Cole's verse to Benny's verse opens the album. Thank you, 2022. I thought you was gonna have nothing but wax joints for me. And last on my list, as far as, and again, I didn't say this in the beginning, but this is in no order, right? This is random. But last on my list of best of 2022, Shea Noir, Food for Thought. Femc, or MC, who makes her own beats, she has impressed me more and more as her career has gone on. Early on, when people were talking about her, and I'm talking maybe pre-pandemic, maybe a year or two pre-pandemic, I wasn't really feeling what I heard. And then there was an EP I kind of liked, and I was like, okay, I kind of like this EP. And then I heard on some other joints, and I was like, yeah, she could rap, and heard some other beats she made for other people. I'm like, yeah, I like her production. So when Food for Thought dropped, and it dropped early in 2022, I was like, well, let me press play. She got a project out, and, I've been feeling a lot of her latest works. This one's no different, man. It's in my best of 2022, man. It's dope, man. Check this joint out, man. I'm getting frustrated with y'all. You know what I'm saying? So there you have it. That is Hip Hop Now Podcast's best hip hop albums of 2022. Were there some albums that you enjoy that did not make my list? I don't care. Okay, I'm just joking. I do care. But let me know what albums you enjoyed this year. How good of a year was 2022? Let's talk about it. Please know, coming up will be my top 5 of 2022. So 5 albums out of this list will make my best of. I will break down in detail why I like them and why I feel like they are the best of the best. Also, I'm going to do a throwback sort of episode with That Time in Hip Hop with the homie Tone of IntoTheDome.com, and we will both talk about our top 5 of the year and the year as a whole. And we'll probably have a special guest, so stay tuned for that. Please know that you can subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button and stay locked into great hip-hop content. If you enjoy it, review it. If you like it, hit a like button wherever you see a like button. But most importantly, share it with people you know enjoy this kind of content. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. And shout out to McLovin Beatz for the new intro. Peace.